Hi, my name is Anna Bennett, and today I'm going to be talking about how the P1 project of defining our personal values helped me grow as a person, not only in this class and as a writer, but also outside of this class, and as I said, as a person. So I wanted to open up with a quote by the King, Elvis Presley. He says, "Values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over anything you do." And defining one value to encompass your entire being is something that I found to be incredibly difficult when I was opening up about my P1 and my brainstorming process. And if you're anything like me, it was really difficult for you too. And I know we all kind of struggled through this together as a class. So reflecting on painful parts of my past was something I'd never had to do before, and opening it up while brainstorming of my chosen value was a new sense of vulnerability that was foreign to me. My chosen value was resilience, but today I wanted to talk about how the aspect of vulnerability and having to look for that value of resilience is what really grew me as the person that I'm talking about. So defining my personal values opened up a new window of growth and self-reflection that grew me as an individual. Brené Brown, who's a scholar, author, and a teacher, defines vulnerability like this. Vulnerability sounds like truth and like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And that's something that I really struggled with when writing this. I felt like because I couldn't define my value right away, that maybe that was a sign of weakness for me, or maybe that I couldn't open up about these parts that were hurting me in the past, that was a sign of weakness, but that was never the case. And I think through the reflection of P1 and through my writing of P4, I've realized that it's a strength. Being able to reflect on what you've gone through and what you've been through is a strength rather than a weakness. And whether you realize it or not, reflecting on your life and your priorities, even if you do not share it with others, is vulnerability. Because I think we think of vulnerability as something that's always with others, but vulnerability is even harder when it's within ourselves. And while we might assume that, like I said, vulnerability is around others, when it's within yourself, it's 10 times harder. And my failure to realize who I was as a person for so long actually developed my value even further. In high school, I struggled with a lot of things, and I really didn't know who I was until I came to college, or really towards the end of my senior year, I felt like. And so doing this project, P1, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to write because it forced me to look within myself. And I think that really opened up a new window of reflection and what my writing could be, and not even what my writing could be, but who I could be as a person and how that could develop through my writing. And I've never had to sit down and think about who I am and what's really important to me and how my experiences have shaped who I am. And I distinctly remember I walked into my sorority study room, I sat down, I opened up my computer, and writing's always been something that's come pretty easily to me, and this was just not the case. I stared at that computer screen for probably 30 minutes before even writing a word because I was just at a loss. I didn't know how to explain who I was with one word. A teacher or professor from Ambrose University said that I think that vulnerability is important with certain people because it allows you to process your feelings in different ways. And putting my thoughts and priorities down on paper, I think helped me do this and process just kind of what I'd been through, because I hadn't really taken a minute, slowed down with all the rush of college and the new to think about how my past affected the person that I am today. And like I said earlier, the value that I chose for my P1 speech was resilience. And resilience is something that I always knew I had in me, but I wasn't aware of how prevalent it was in my life until I started to analyze these stories and things that I included in that P1 speech and how they affected my experiences. And learning about my experiences as well as others through the process of peer review really broadened my worldview and opened my eyes to that I wasn't alone in this fear of vulnerability, and gaining a better understanding of not only myself, but also other people. Specifically, as I said, through the process of peer review, I was able to sit down and I was able to look into my classmates' hearts and minds and realize that we all kind of shared this common fear of vulnerability and of opening up about who we are, even when it was just to ourselves. And something I found really interesting was a group of researchers from the University of Mannheim in Germany decided to explore that a question in a series of 7 studies published recently in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. When study subjects were asked to assess other people who showed vulnerability, they tended to view those acts more positively and were relatively quick to notice the upsides. When they were asked to imagine themselves displaying vulnerability, they viewed the acts more negatively. The researchers dubbed these other differences in vulnerability the beautiful mess effect, to encapsulate the perspectives of both the actor, who may perceive their vulnerable situation as a mess, and the observer, who seems more likely to see the beautiful side. And that's a quote from Psychology Today. And I really clung on to this idea of a beautiful mess. When I was sitting down to write my P1 speech, I felt like it was a mess. I had no idea where to start. I had no idea how to even dive into the question of who I am as a person. But I learned that the discovery of our own values and hearing about others through this P1 process made me realize that we all live in this beautiful mess, whether we realize it or not. We portray these images on social media and to others of what we want others to see as our perfect life. But for most people, for 99% of the people, that's never the case. We all live in this beautiful mess that is talked about. And I think one of the most important things about that beautiful mess is that being curious about ourselves and what makes us us is what makes the world revolve. It's what keeps that beautiful mess beautiful, is questions and curiosity and constantly wondering about who we are and why we're here. And while resilience is still one of the things that I value most, through this class and through this process of P1 and P4, I've come to realize that I value vulnerability equally as much as I value resilience. It's just as important, but in a different way. And opening up to ourselves and each other betters us as individuals and as students of this university and community. Thank you.